Hello and welcome to another tutorial on Internet of Things. In today's tutorial, I'm going to be walking you through the process of sending data from Raspberry Pi to IBM Cloud. I'm going to be sending DHT sensor data, which are temperature and humidity, to IBM Cloud. And I'm going to be using the Watson IoT Platform, which is a service offered by IBM Cloud. If you are not subscribed to this channel yet, kindly subscribe to the channel and click on the notification bar so that you'll be informed whenever I dropped a new tutorial on Internet of Things. You can check the playlist below, which contain different tutorials on sending data from different IoT boards to different cloud platform. So today we are going to be walking you through how to send data from Raspberry Pi to IBM Cloud. Now let's start with the hardware connection. So now let me walk you through the hardware connection. Here I have my DHT and I have my resistor. It's a 10K resistor. I have my breadboard here and I have my Raspberry Pi. Yeah. So as you can see, I'm using a Raspberry Pi 4 for this tutorial. I just got this newly. So I've already set up my connections. I've connected the jumper wires to the Raspberry Pi. So this is the first one. This is connected to pin 1 of the Raspberry Pi. And this is going to be the data pin. It's connected to pin 4 on the Raspberry Pi, that is GPIO4. Not actually pin 4, but GPIO4. And this is connected to pin number 39, which is a ground pin. So don't forget, this is pin 1. This is GPIO4. If you have to count, GPIO4 falls to pin number 7. So this is pin number 7, which is GPIO4, and this is pin number 39, which is a ground pin. So I'm going to plug in. Let me put this to one side. I'm going to plug in my DHT sensor A, and in this sensor, this is pin 1, pin 2, 3, and 4. So my DHT sensor will come here, and I have my 10K resistor in between pin 1 and pin 2. So I just go back and plug this in. So I have my 10K resistor in between pin 1 and pin 2. So as I have this is VCC pin, which is pin 1, 3 volts on the Raspberry Pi. It comes to pin 1. And this is the data pin, which is GPL4, pin number 7 on the Raspberry Pi. It comes to pin 2. So pin 3 will be left unconnected, while the ground pin will go to the last pin, which is pin 4. So this is the old setup. So I'm using 3 pin, don't forget, pin 1, pin 7, and pin 39. So this is my ground. This is the VCC, which is pin number 1, 3 volts on the Raspberry Pi, and this is GPL4, which is pin 7 on the Raspberry Pi. So I'm going to connect this to my computer now and do all necessary setup. So I'll be connecting my Raspberry Pi to my computer via headless, so that a lot of things will be easy for me to do. I just slot this in and connect this to my computer. Then I'll power on the Raspberry Pi. For this tutorial, I'll be working on my personal computer and also on my Raspberry Pi. I have my personal computer set up and I'll be accessing my Raspberry Pi via VNC. If you have a desktop, a keyboard, a mouse, you can access your Raspberry Pi as in edit form. Here I'm using headless form. I already have my SSH set up and I've already configured my Raspberry Pi to allow VNC communication. So I'll just open my VNC viewer. I have it open here and I can type in raspberrypi.local. If you want to be able to do this using raspberrypi.local, you have to have Apple printer service installed on your computer. Then you can always use raspberrypi.local to access your Raspberry Pi if you're connecting via VNC viewer. So I'll type in my password. And here I have my Raspberry Pi logged into. So This is my Raspberry Pi window, and this is my computer window. So I'll be working on these two majorly, both on my Raspberry Pi and on my personal computer. So I'll be doing all settings in IBM Cloud on my personal computer, and I'll be doing all the coding on my Raspberry Pi. So I just want to establish that you can do this as two independent setup. You can decide to run all your setups on the Raspberry Pi, do the IBM configuration on the Raspberry Pi, and test everything out on your Raspberry Pi. Since your Raspberry Pi can browse, it can access the internet, so you can do everything on Raspberry Pi. But I'm going to make the two system independent. I'll be doing my IBM Cloud settings on my personal computer, and I'll be doing the coding on Raspberry Pi, just to show that they can link to each other. So I'm going to start by setting up my IBM Cloud on my personal computer. So we are going to be using the Watson IoT platform provided by IBM Cloud. To navigate to IBM Cloud, you can simply type IBM Cloud on your browser window. So I'm going to click on IBM Cloud, ibm.com/cloud. So you have to have an account before you can access the IBM Cloud. So if you are new to IBM Cloud, you can just create a new account. But if you already have an account, just sign into your account and we are good to go. It's quite easy to set up IBM Cloud. Now I have an account created already. I'll just be signing into my account and be doing all necessary setup. So I've already signed into my account. So to access the IBM Cloud, I'm going to click on console. So here it's asking me to log in. So you have to input your IBM ID, which is in all cases your email, and then the password. And here I have IBM console fully open. So to create an IoT service and to access IBM Watson Studio, I'm going to just search for resources and search for IoT. And you see we have Internet of Things platform. So click on Internet of Things platform, which is part of IBM service. So we have all these settings to do in IoT platform. So you can have, if you check the pricing plan, you see we have the light version, which is always free. And under the features, you see it includes up to 500 registered devices and a maximum of 200 MB of each data metric. So we are just going to stick to the free plan and accept the license agreement and click on create. You can leave the location as it is and other settings as default. So once we are done creating our Internet of Things platform, we're just going to launch it by clicking on launch. You can just really know about this by clicking on docs, and if you scroll down, we have a lot of information displayed about the Internet of Things platform. If you check plan and connection, there are quite a lot of informations that are useful for you there. So coming back to manage, I'll just click on launch to launch my Internet of Things platform. And another window is going to open where we can set up our Internet of Things. And this window is the Watson IBM platform. You can see it's displayed here, IBM Watson IoT platform. So here, once again, you need to sign in using the same IBM ID and also your password in Watson IoT platform. So I'm going to click on sign in and I'll be directed to log in again. So continue. So don't forget you're using the same password and username you use to log into IBM Cloud. So now I've successfully logged in into Watson IoT platform. So to access Watson IoT platform, actually, you click on the top right hand corner, you're going to see where your identity is being displayed, your username and also the org. So I'm going to click on this, which is my organization, and it's going to load the Watson IBM platform's dashboard. So here we are in the Watson IoT platform. If you check the left hand corner, we have the options where we have board, devices, members, apps, usage, security, and stuff. So the first thing we want to do is to create a device type. Device type, just like any other IoT platform, is to categorize all our devices into one. Let's say, for example, you have a lot of devices you want to integrate into IBM Cloud. You can choose to put them in different types for easy monitoring. So I'm going to come to device types and I'm going to create a device type. So yeah, I don't have a device type created. I'll click on add device type. So I'm just going to call my own Raspberry. I'm going to use RPi, and description, you can just add any description. I can call it Raspberry Pi devices. So I know that Under this device type, I'm sending all my devices that are Raspberry Pi. So click on next. And all this information, you can just leave them on field. You can just leave them the way they are. It's not actually a must. You can just, I'm just going to put something, just to type something. But you can just leave them the way as default. So after that, click on finish. And with that, we are done creating our device type. So after that, you have to create a device. So you can just register a device here, but I'm going to go back to device and click on add device. So I'm going to click here and I can add my device. So this is the point where it gets more technical. I have to be able to access my Raspberry Pi before I can create a device. So here, if you check the interface, you see add device, we have device type and also the device ID. If you click on device type, IBM is going to pop out all the device type you have created. Here I already created a single device type, so I'm going to select RPi. Now, the device ID is not actually a name that you give to the Raspberry Pi, to the device actually. So you have to go back to a Raspberry Pi and check the MAC address of the Raspberry Pi, and that will be my device type. So I'll just go to my VNC window, which is this. So this is my Raspberry Pi window, and I'm going to check the MAC address of my Raspberry Pi. So coming to terminal, if I type ifconfig, so scrolling up, I'm going to have my MAC address displayed. If you check here, this is the ETA. So I have my MAC address here, E4 5F012CFD and 11. So I'm going to copy this and paste it into device ID. Don't forget, I'm working on two different computers here, so you can't directly copy from here and paste it here. So I've just typed this one after the other. So I have my MAC address here. Don't forget, I'm not typing the colon there, just the letters, the characters. So after that, click on next. So that is going to display all the information I typed when creating my device type. If it's not displaying anything, for example, if you leave device type, all this information by default, you just leave them as blank. It's going to be blank here also, but we don't need that actually. So after that, click on next. So you're going to allow IBM to generate an authentication token for us automatically. So we're not going to put anything here. Then click on next. So after that, it's going to show the summary of our devices. Then you're going to click on finish. So on the finish page, we have all this information given by IBM. We have the organization ID, we have the device type, device ID, authentication method, and also authentication token. If you come down here, you see that authentication tokens are non-recoverable. So I'm going to copy this out because once I leave this page, I'll not be able to see this again. So I'll just copy this and paste it on my notepad. So I'm going to be using all this information in my code to access my IBM Cloud. So and with this, we are done creating our device. So the next thing I'm going to do is to create a dashboard to monitor my data. After creating the device, if you click on device, you're going to see that our device has been created. I have my device here, and the status at present is disconnected. So you have my device type, and other information can be seen if you click on the drop down arrow. So I'm going to create dashboard to view my data now. So if you come to board and click on boards, you have all our boards displayed. You see that two boards have been created, and there are 3 cards and 4 cards in 2 different boards. So these are just risk overview and usage overview. So these are not the data that we want to be displayed. So I'm going to click on usage overview to create a customized chart for my data, which is temperature and humidity. So to add a new card, just click on add new card. So here we are going to select a chart type. For my temperature, I'm going to select line chart, and here I'm to select the device that the data will be coming from. So it's coming from this particular device. So I'm going to click here and click on next. So after that, the next thing is to connect a data set to my dashboard. So I'm going to click on connect new data set, and I have some data to input here. The first thing you have to take note of is event. So whichever name you are using as your event must be the same name you are sending using MQTT in the code. So make sure you take note of the name you are assigning as events. Here I'm calling my own temperature. So you can call the property and also the name, anything you like. And the text, the type is going to be a number, and the unit is degrees Celsius. So after that, I'm going to click on next. So here we have to select chat type and also the size. So we have small, medium, large, and extra large. So I'm going to just select small. We can change this later after we see the nature of our data. So I'll just choose medium or yeah, and click on next. So after that, we have to give our chat a name. I will give my chat temperature chat here, and I can click on submit. And with this, I'm done creating a chart for my temperature. Here I have the chart displayed at the last part of my dashboard. So to create a new chart for humidity, I'm going to select line chart once again and select my device. So click on next and again connect a new data set. So I'm going to make my event to be humidity, and I have to make sure I'm typing the same thing while writing my code. So the number is test and the unit is temperature. The unit is percentage. So yes, okay. I'm just click on next to create this, and I'm going to call this humidity chart. So with that, I'm done creating my two charts for my data coming from the Raspberry Pi. So you know that on dashboard you can drag your card to wherever you want them to be displayed, and you can also resize them later on. So with this, I'm going to continue my Raspberry Pi and write the code. To access my Raspberry Pi, I'm going to open up my VNC viewer, and here I have my Raspberry Pi window. So basically, we're going to be doing two major setups on our Raspberry Pi. First is to set up our Raspberry Pi to be able to read data from our DHT level sensor. And secondly, how to send that data to IBM Cloud. So I'm not going to be walking you. Probably you might have your Raspberry Pi set up to read data from DHT. If you already done that, that is perfect. You can just skip over to the part where we send data to IBM Cloud. But let me just talk a little bit about reading data from DHT sensor on the Raspberry Pi. So I'm not going to be walking you through the whole step, but I'm going to be linking you to Adafruit documentation on how to achieve this. So you can just type Adafruit in your Raspberry Pi window. I don't need to do this on my PC since I can browse using my Raspberry Pi. So I can just type Adafruit DHT. That's on the right. Okay, I can just type this and I'm sure we have something. So we can just click on the first that's going to pop up. So you can follow this tutorial and set up your Raspberry Pi to read data from DHT sensor. So the first thing you have to do is to click on this, set up your Linux board for Circuit Python library. After clicking on that, you'll be linked to another page where you set up your other fruit, your Raspberry Pi to work with Circuit Python. You just have to copy this code and run it in your terminal, and copy this last one also and run it in your terminal. And with that, you are good to go. So after doing that, you can just go back to the page and install these libraries. The first thing you have to install is the Circuit Python DHT library. Then you install the lib gpiod. So after that, you can copy this code, which is a sample code to work with your DHT sensor. So after that, once you're able to read DHT sensor perfectly with your Raspberry Pi, you can carry on with this tutorial. So I've already set my Raspberry Pi to read data from DHT sensor. So I'll just go to the second stage. So if I'm going to close my browser window, and yeah. So coming back to our terminal, we have to make sure that we have MQTT client installed on our Raspberry Pi, because we're going to be using MQTT protocol to send data from the Raspberry Pi to IBM Cloud. So we just have to install the PAO MQTT. So to install PAO MQTT, I've just type in pip3 install PAO MQTT. So now take note of something that I'm using pip3 for Python 3. So if you're using Python 2, you can just type only pip instead of pip3. So if you have Python 3 installed on your Raspberry Pi, and it's quite advisable to have Python 3 installed on your Raspberry Pi. So you can use pip3 install power mqtt. But if you're running Python 2, just type pip install mqtt, power mqtt. And because I already have it installed, it said requirement already satisfied. And with that, I'm good to go in writing my code to send data from Raspberry Pi to IBM Cloud. Now it's the time to write the code. So I already have the code written using Tony IDE inside my Raspberry Pi. So if you check the first part of the code where I'm importing all my modules, so I connect my DHT to GPIO4. So I have DHT 11 to board D4, and I have this set up for my Raspberry Pi to effectively read DHT data. So now we need to input this for information from our IBM Cloud. So the first one we have the organization, device type, the token, and device ID. If you remember, I copied all this before inside my notepad. So, and don't forget, you can't directly copy and paste from my notepad to my Raspberry Pi because these are two different computers. So I've just used my hand to type in all. Now I've typed in all the necessary details, the organization, device ID, token, and also the device type. So if you scroll down, here if you check where we have published topic 1 and published topic 2, I have my temperature and my humidity here. So make sure this is the same as when we're naming the events while creating our dashboard. And with that, with the rest of the code, we'll be going to send data from Raspberry Pi to IBM Cloud. So the link to the code will be posted in the description below. So with this, I'm going to save this and I'm going to run it. So whenever our device successfully send data to IBM Cloud, it's going to say publish. So I'll go to my terminal and so I'm in the document folder. So I'm going to run the code. So I call it IBM Raspberry .py. So you can see after sending temperature and humidity, it says publish. So our data has been successfully sent to IBM Cloud. So I'll go to my IBM Cloud now and check if my cloud is receiving data from my Raspberry Pi. I'll just go back to my personal computer window, which is this. And here, under the device, I see that the device has been connected by this green button. If I click on the drop down arrow, I'm going to have my device information. So to view my data, I just click on recent events. And then I have the device coming from my Raspberry Pi. I have my humidity and I have my temperature, humidity 46 and temperature 33. You can see it just logged a few seconds ago. So if you go back to our boards, I want to point out to that as at the time I'm recording this tutorial, IBM does not have support for non-JSON data format. So we can't view our data using the dashboard, but we can view it from the device. So probably by the time you are trying this out, they now support non-JSON format to be displayed on the dashboard. So, but for now, we can't view our data on the dashboard. So, but to view our data, we can always come to device, and under recent events, we have our data coming into IBM Cloud. And that's it. Thank you very much for checking out this tutorial, and I'm going to see you in the next tutorial.